We often find the majority of TikTok users, they don't have the TV on while they're on TikTok. It's very difficult, I think. When you're normally on your phone, you are normally watching on TV or vice versa. Because it's sound on as a platform, it's very hard to be doing both. So, think about how you can engage. Think about if you see other pieces of content on the platform, can you be inspired by what they've done?
Hi guys, welcome back to the Armchair Show. I'm your host, Mark Ellis, and I'm joined today by Jack Carter from TikTok. Jack, do you want to give us a very quick intro to who you are and what you do at TikTok?
Hello, firstly, thank you for having me. So I work at TikTok. I look after the automotive side of TikTok, so all things to do with cars. I've been here about 3.5 years. And my role is to work directly with OEMs and as part of that dealerships and getting them onto TikTok and advertising and running campaigns.
Busy man from the sounds of it.
Busy man, and we've seen a lot of change. So for the last 3 years, as you can imagine, when TikTok kind of first emerged onto the scene, it was about kind of getting the name out there and educating a lot of car brands. And now we've kind of seen that transition. We've seen kind of an aging up of our audience, a diversity of our audience, and same with the brands on the platform. So it's been a good 3 years, and we're in a really good place now with car brands generally and dealerships.
Yeah. So what does your day look like then? What's the typical
day?
It
varies. That's a classic answer. No one day is the same, but it does. It works. I work closely with my clients in helping them develop campaigns based on projects and briefs that they got coming up based on their yearly strategy. What kind of models are they wanting to promote? What's their kind of focus for the year? Some might be more around kind of a branding moment. So you might be aware, obviously, the Rugby World Cup's happening at the minute. Defender are one of the headline sponsors, so they're running some activity to do with that on the platform. Equally, it's part of our role is education. So talking to not just the marketing teams at these companies, but going a little bit wider. I think TikTok generally is a platform within automotive is still relatively new. So there's a bit of a knowledge gap. My kind of role is to close that gap and explain exactly what TikTok can offer brands, from a business perspective. And I think maybe chip away at some perceptions that people might have about it.
Yeah.
And that for me has been, I guess, the focus of my first 3 years of actually realizing that potential customers are on the platform. It's a place where you can talk to an entirely new community, and you can kind of develop an interesting kind of creative strategy on TikTok. We see TikTok as an entertainment platform rather than a social one. And I always say that to my clients. They go, what's kind of the difference? And it's a nuanced difference, but it's kind of an important one because when you're on TikTok, you're there to be entertained. You're not really on the platform to follow people or to be friends, even though that functionality is there. You're primarily there to be entertained and to discover. And I think when you've got that kind of mindset on the platform, then from an advertising perspective, a marketing perspective, it's very interesting because you can then start to talk to users who are already engaged and they're kind of willing and wanting to be engaged by brands and not just other users on the platform.
I think for me, I'm a big car fan and I'm a big TikTok user as well. And my feed, because of that, is full of car stuff, obviously, because it works very well in that respect. But if I'm being honest, the majority of it's regular people. It's influencers basically who are showing me their cars, and I'm seeing more of that content possibly than I am brand content, which is I guess I don't know if that's the intention or not. But you mentioned Defender then, and I'm obsessed with Defenders as well. So I'm seeing a lot of that Defender content, but it is brand. It's the brand itself. It's linked to the Rugby World Cup. With that in mind, I mean that might, I suppose that might contribute to the maybe some misconceptions about TikTok as well from brands' point of view. But what are brands doing at the moment? You've mentioned a Defender. Have you got any other examples of what brands are doing on TikTok currently?
Yeah, a lot. So sticking with JLR for a moment, they launched Range Rover on the profile. And when I say launched, I mean they launched their profile. Now, I think a key thing to say here is to be on TikTok, you don't have to have a profile. That means an organic kind of channel. You can advertise without one. And generally when brands do that, they're driving users to their website, similar to how other platforms work. So a lot of my advertisers, a lot of my clients don't have profiles, but then some do. And JLR, they do have a profile, and they launched the Range Rover earlier this year in February. And then they follow that up with Defender, which launched in summer, in August time. And for them, it's kind of all part of this new strategy in terms of that they've kind of got this house of brands model, which they're following, where they're kind of focusing on the 4 distinct brands under the JLR umbrella. And TikTok is a platform where they're tapping into an entirely new audience. They're in the kind of this modern luxury space. And that's been under huge amounts of change, particularly on TikTok. We've seen that they're seeing there's a huge opportunity on TikTok to do something there. Yeah. Outside of JLR, Stellantis Group are really active. So Peugeot recently. Peugeot were probably one of our biggest clients, and that they ran a campaign which we called Always In. It's always on, but done in a TikTok way. So when we talk about always on content, it's about how always having a presence on a platform. On TikTok, you probably need to do a little bit more than that. And when we say always in, it means being always into relevant communities. So Peugeot's audience might be more focused around style, design, music. And so content needs to be created which is appealing to those types of communities on the platform, because otherwise it comes across as a bit tone deaf. Yeah. What we know on TikTok is having TV ad apps run on the platform doesn't really work. We did a bit of research. 61% of our users expect to see different content from automotive manufacturers than what they see on the big screen. So we always talk about native content and creating content that feels authentic and right for the platform. And so Peugeot really leaned into this. They created this always on strategy, always in strategy. They created around 25 pieces of content that ran for 3 months. And it really kind of worked across the funnel. So firstly, they created a bespoke track, which was TikTok Made Me Drive It, which worked really well. That was all around kind of getting appeal for the brand, getting people interested and engaged. And then they went further and they created content. They worked with an automotive creator, She Talks Cars, who's on TikTok, who's done really well. She created content around product, so looking at the cars that they have, doing reviews. And it's great when you have an expert voice doing that for you because it's believable. When it comes from an actual creator, then people are more likely to listen to it. Yeah. And then they went further and we created performance-focused content, so lead gen, which is all around getting people to test drive. And it's a journey because you can't just go straight into conversion content. You need to warm people up. We know that obviously the path to purchase is an extremely long one when it comes to cars. So how do you nurture people along that funnel? And that's what that they did really successfully. They drove a 76% increase in intent, which for automotive is a huge result. You don't normally do that after one campaign. So they took a strategy going, we'll take a little bit longer over a longer period of time. And we drove, they drove some very impressive results. So Peugeot being leading the way, Vauxhall have been very active as well. They ran a Mocha Electric campaign, which is all around unboxing yourself. And that was part of a bigger above the line campaign. And that's another thing, I think, to your earlier point, what do we do, or what's my day-to-day role is sometimes there is a bigger campaign and it's finding what the TikTok version of that looks like. Okay. What does unbox yourself look like when it comes to a TikTok piece of content? And so we work with creators who were travel creators. And it was about exploring different places or unexpected places and locations in the UK. So it's kind of about unboxing and surprising yourself, I guess, in that sense. So there's been a range. The luxury end, Bentley have been very active on the platform, quite early days. Lamborghini, I think, were almost the very first. I think those guys are Mercedes, alongside BMW. And I think that's interesting that you have the luxury end really engaging with it, because it's kind of understanding the need to be relevant, even not necessarily your direct buyer today, but certainly your buyer of tomorrow. So, when the choice might be between a Bentley, a Range Rover, a Lamborghini, a Ferrari, whatever it may be, they're picking your brand. Yeah. So those guys really came onto it quickly, and we're now starting to see the volume OEMs kind of pick up, and their content, as you can imagine, is going to be a little bit more lower funnel, so around driving leads, driving conversions on the website, car configurations, etc.
There's a lot getting involved, aren't there, I think, from the sounds of it. Are you finding, how are they approaching the content? Because you mentioned earlier that, and I've experienced this myself as a viewer of TikTok, where as soon as I see a piece of content that looks too polished, like you say, probably cut from an ad, reframed, etc., I swipe away immediately. Yeah. Whereas if someone appears on the screen and they're a creator, or it's just something which looks a little bit, for the want of a better phrase, lower rent, I'm interested. Yes. Is that a misconception, do you think, from some of these brands in terms of how they need to approach it? And equally, as a kind of follow-up question to that, does that mean their budgets for this can be pegged back a bit?
Yeah, it's a really good question. One I get asked all the time. We talk about being lo-fi, but lo-fi not in the quality of production. Lo-fi in terms of the content that's going to engage a consumer or an audience or a community on TikTok. And by that means, what is the story that you're trying to tell, and is it relatable? Because a lot of the time when you put stuff on TV and you do cut it down, it does feel glossy. It doesn't feel relatable. It doesn't feel like it belongs on TikTok. People shoot in high quality, on high quality cameras, real high definition all the time. So having that glossy feel from a look perspective isn't an issue. It's about the story that you're trying to tell is the important part. It kind of varies, I think, when you have your more luxury brands versus your slightly non-luxury brands, let's say. There's an expectation, I think, when it comes to luxury brands that there's a slightly glossier finish. But if there's not anything that you're trying to tell which is engaging, entertaining, people will swipe past anyway. The best way for brands to get involved initially is firstly working with creators. So we have something called the TikTok Creator Marketplace. Anyone can kind of log on and create an account. And you can actually search for creators. It's a website which holds a lot of our TikTok creators, and you can see their engagement stats. You can see where they're based. You can see who's viewing their videos, and you can get in touch with them directly on that platform, and you can brief them. Okay. So that's a really good place to start because it means you're actually leaning on an expert to actually help you develop content. Whereas when it's just yourself or your dealership or your team, it goes, well, where do we begin? And that's always a tricky one. So lean into the creators. We have something called the TikTok Creative Center, which is like an inspiration website, let's say, gives you the latest trends, the latest hashtags, the latest trending songs, and you can search by category as well, and you can see the videos that are doing really well at the minute. That's a good place to start if you're kind of trying to ideate whatever you may be. So those are two good: Creator Marketplace and Creative Center. We then also have creative partners. So if I get a brief from a client, then I would work with a creative partner to develop. So the Peugeot content that we develop for Always In, we work with a partner called Uncovered, and they kind of act almost like an agency. And they'll develop strategy and ideas and then actually end up shooting the content. Yeah. And they'll work with creators in their films, but it will be kind of more directed and produced on their part. So I think to your question, hi-fi, lo-fi, don't worry about the quality issue. It doesn't need to feel like it's just been shot on your phone. It can be done on the camera. Obviously, it needs to be vertical. That's the main thing. You don't want to have a landscape. Just make sure it's 9:16. But the key thing is, what is the actual story you're trying to tell, and are you telling it in an engaging way? And you can even tell, we see car reviews doing really well on the platform, and that doesn't necessarily have the most amazing, exciting piece of content, but people find it interesting because it feels, I think, inherently more intimate. We often find the majority of TikTok users, they don't have the TV on while they're on TikTok. It's very difficult, I think. When you're normally on your phone, you are normally watching on TV or vice versa. Because it's sound on as a platform, it's very hard to be doing both. So, think about how you can engage. Think about if you see other pieces of content on the platform, can you be inspired by what they've done? So can you see other brands? Oh, they've done something which has done quite well, interesting. Could I do a take on that? That's not stealing, that's been inspired by. And that's kind of having your own spin on it. Think about trying to get the user involved in terms of your content. I think when we're looking at dealerships, it can still kind of be quite intimidating to go into a dealership. And I do think TikTok's kind of breaking down that barrier. It's quite informative. You can see it as a way to educate a lot of users. We know there's still a big knowledge gap when it comes to things like EV. So how can we go about and how can you guys create some content which is addressing those concerns maybe, or misunderstandings, or misconceptions about that as a category? So we always talk about just make sure you know what you're trying to tell and you try and do it in a succinct way. I guess in terms of time length, that's what people also ask. How long should I make my TikTok? You can make TikToks quite long now. I mean, even up to 10 minutes organically. When we're looking at brands, we kind of say look around the 20 to 30 second mark when you're running kind of paid advertising. But again, you could also if you can tell a story in 10 seconds, tell it in 10 seconds. You don't need to elongate it just for the sake of it.
What's the difference between paid and organic? What's your recommendations for that? So for a brand looking to get into this and they haven't done it before, and they're looking at this, because my assumption, I might be wrong with this, but my assumption from their perspective would be that they're thinking, right, we've got to pay TikTok, we've got to put paid ads in to do this. What's the kind of, how should they approach that, paid versus organic?
However they want. But to be helpful, it's I guess it depends on the size of the business. It depends on the objectives and what they're trying to achieve. Sometimes starting off organic just gets you going, and it starts to. I think with TikTok it's about just getting involved, and sometimes you can overthink it, and actually until you do it, you really won't know. So kind of just diving straight in. Organic allows you to do that. What you could also potentially see that as a way of, as kind of a dress rehearsal in effect of what content does well, what content doesn't do so well. It's kind of a test and learn environment. And then you can start to get a feeling for the content that starting to click with consumers. People are liking it, sharing it, commenting on it. And then you can work your way up into running paid advertising from there.
Yep.
And that can be for them focus on if you've got a particular model that you're wanting to promote. If there's an event that you're talking about as well, you can be focused on what we call flagship moments or tentpole moments. Vice versa, if you start with paid, it means then you're guaranteeing yourself a certain audience that you're going to be hitting. So you're going to be guaranteeing you hit a kind of certain number of people, and you know that you're going to be delivering a certain message to that community or whoever you're trying to engage with. I think as a rule of thumb, starting organic is kind of, you can then warm your way up into the paid side.
Ease yourself in, basically, and just see.
Ease yourself in, yeah.
And what about user-generated content, that sort of stuff? Should they be looking to use customers in the nicest possible way, for want of a better phrase, to generate content for them? Yeah,
so this is interesting. Porsche on TikTok, on their profile, they're quite big exponents of that strategy. So they will look, and you can imagine there's some amazing Porsche content on there. The Porsche fan base is strong.
I keep seeing it,
It's strong pretty much everywhere, not just on TikTok. And so they would reach out to users who have shot that, and then ask their permission. Can we then run that on our platform? On our profile. It's entirely up to you how you want to do it. Do you want to generate content yourself, or do you want to potentially use UGC? If you go down that route, then obviously you have to make sure that both parties are happy in terms of using it, etc. And that's between the brand and the user themselves. So it sometimes helps. I think if you don't have a way of capturing content yourself, that's a quick way of doing it.
Yeah.
But personally, I always talk about creating a personality for you as a brand on the platform. When you look at the best brands on TikTok, so the likes of Defender, the likes of Bentley on their profiles, or Lamborghini or Porsche, you can see a style of content. You can see the way that they're trying to, I guess, engage with their audience, and that's really key. So as long as you kind of have a defined personality, whether that's humorous, whether that's informative, whether that's educational, then as long as UGC that you're using works within that strategy, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
I think where you probably don't want to be is you don't have a style, and so you do a little bit of everything. That's how you build up an audience, is they kind of know what you are and what you represent on the platform. So that's how I'd start. I think the other thing, if you're going to use UGC, why not just work with creators initially? As I said, why don't you engage with, there's a range. You can go with big creators, you can go with small creators. Obviously, costing then is a sliding scale, but it's definitely not prohibitive. There's lots of creators out there that would be happy to work with, any business, in all honesty. And so it's about making sure that you guys are aligned in terms of strategies and what you're trying to achieve. And it's just a great way to get content without you having to actually shoot it or come up with the ideas yourself.
That's the beauty of the platform, isn't it? There's so many creators on there, I suppose. And just quickly on that point about developing a style and developing, like you say, a personality, is that something in your experience that develops over time, or should brands go in with this defined idea? Because again, going back to traditional marketing and that sort of stuff, they'd have their brand persona, they'd sit there for weeks, months, whatever, working all that stuff out. Is it the same with TikTok, or is it more a case of, like you say, just getting started and letting that brand personality develop?
Again, it's a range. So if we're talking at the higher end, so that the kind of large OEMs, then there's going to be strategies that we have to kind of operate within that framework, in effect. But even within that space, the best OEMs, the ones that have really performed on TikTok, have just kind of got involved and have kind of refined their strategy over the course of time. And so the first campaign you put out, good, but it could be better. Second, following, third, fourth, and you start to get a feel for it. And each time you're doing it, you're getting more comfortable, more understanding of both the platform and what you on a brand stands for on the platform. So I think with kind of, you know, that approach is probably the best way, having kind of an idea of where you want to go. That said, until you try it, you don't know. So there's got to be an element of flexibility. And if we're going to put this style out, we're okay if we then start to move across and we started humorous and we don't really like that. We're going to go a bit more informative. And it's kind of flexing between the two. I think when you're a slightly smaller business, it's you probably have the flexibility from the off more so than maybe the larger OEMs. Yeah. So actually your strategy could be a few things, and the best approach is just to try each of those out and see which kind of works best on the platform.
Less red tape and less things to worry about,
probably.
I guess, to a degree.
Yeah,
potentially.
Yeah.
Just to wrap this up then, Jack, what's that classic question? What if there's a brand listening to this today, a marketing manager or someone listening to this and thinking, right, he's convinced me, because you've done a very good job at
I'll hope
convinced
so.
me anyway. What's the one thing they can do tomorrow just to get cracking?
Sure. So first things first, I'd visit those two sites I mentioned, so the TikTok Creator Marketplace and the TikTok Creative Center. You can then start to immerse yourself within exactly how TikTok works, you know, what's going on the platform. The other thing is download TikTok. I can imagine there'll be a fair few people who don't have TikTok. Yeah. So I would recommend and encourage to download TikTok. It's a fun experience, I promise.
I agree.
I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and just kind of start to get a feel of what it is like, because as an app, it is very immersive. You open it up and you've got full screen video and it's sound on, and you can start to understand. You can start to see how other brands are utilizing it. Once you then downloaded the app, you can then consider or start looking at, well, actually, if we were on TikTok, what would we be like, or what type of brand would we be on the platform? And that's when you can start to get inspired by those around, the users that are on doing some interesting content, other brands that are doing some interesting stuff. I think that's kind of the first step is always the hardest. Kind of it's with anything, until you actually give it a go, you won't know. So take the TikTok plunge and have some fun is what I would say.
That's a great advice. I think, like you say, just using it and being inspired, that's gonna get your mind working, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Jack, thanks for coming on the Armchair
Show.
It's been great. It's gone very quickly as always,
very quickly.
But I'm sure it won't be the last time anyway.
Thank you for having me. Great.
Cheers, Jack. Thank you.